magic of tourism. We're going to touch on a number of subjects this evening in the world of tourism, but I thought we would start by the basic unit of tourism, which is the tourist. The World Tourism Organization defines for us what a tourist is. Someone who lives in a certain place, and they go somewhere else to see something for a while. And it's simple as that. Whether it's me or you, or someone like me or you, and we leave the place where we live, and we go off somewhere else for a while, we become a tourist. Now, whether it's me or you, or someone like me or you, and we go on vacation, we spend a week somewhere, we come back, hopefully we had a good time, maybe our colleagues noticed we weren't at work, but beyond that, we probably don't think we had much impact on the world, because we're just one tourist. But when you have 1 billion tourists moving around the planet, that has an impact. In 2015, in fact, 1.2 billion people traveled internationally. This accounted for a full 10% of the global GDP of the planet. 1 out of every 11 jobs on Earth is in fact tourism related. Combined, this resulted in $1.4 trillion in exports, which is 7% of the global exports and 30% of the services exports combined. Tourism plays a major role in the global economy, and it's increasing. The WTO projects that in 2030, 1.8 billion people will be traveling internationally. That's the macro view. That's how travelers impact tourism. What's equally interesting to look at is the micro view. How does tourism impact the traveler? 2 years ago, there was a study on exactly that subject. How does travel affect those who travel? In particular, they looked at families, and in particular, they looked at the children traveling with their families. And the results were quite intriguing. Among the families that traveled, children who traveled with their parents, 80% enjoyed school more. They achieved better grades, and a higher percentage went on to complete university degrees. And adults who had traveled with their families as children went on to earn salaries 12% higher on average. These statistics held true regardless of gender, or ethnicity, or socioeconomic status. That is a profound effect. Statistics went on, and it was found that 90% of the children found that traveling with their parents was quality time. And adults who had traveled as children found that those trips were among their favorite memories. 65% of couples found that traveling sparked romance in their relationship. And a statistic which was particularly interesting was that couples that traveled together stayed together as couples longer and felt more connected. This is something I witnessed firsthand growing up. My parents were married for 56 years, and together they traveled to over 100 countries. Both of those numbers are very impressive. When my father passed away a few years ago, we decided to have a memorial service in my parents' town. And so I decided to put together a photo montage of pictures of my parents in all the places they had visited. A half century of selfies, if you wish. And I put together a little photo show, slideshow that would roll as a loop to show on a screen during the memorial service. And as the memorial service started and the slides were turning, there was a chuckle that began to ripple through the people in attendance, which is not something you normally expect at a memorial service. And as the slideshow progressed, the chuckle turned into laughter. So I looked at the slideshow, and I realized something I hadn't seen before. As the slideshow progressed through the years, regardless of the destination or the decade, in the pictures of my parents, my father was wearing the exact same clothes. Whether they were standing in front of the Taj Mahal or Tiananmen Square, there was my dad in his travel slacks and his favorite sweater. Something my parents had discovered as I suppose a lot of travelers do, is they derived their pleasure from the travel. The happiness came from the travel versus spending their money on buying possessions and personal things. Last year, researchers at Cornell University conducted a study and found the same thing. They found that when they studied that actual happiness, they looked at, was happiness more important from experiences or from stuff that we buy? The idea was if we buy something that we're going to have for a number of years, we should have more happiness from that than, say, money we spend on a trip, which is over in a couple of days. Actually, the opposite turned out to be true. We all love getting our new iPhone 12, but darn it, if 6 months later they don't come out with the iPhone 12s Plus with sparkles. And the newness that we derive happiness from fades. And even if we keep things of value, over time, they just fade into our existence and become used to these things. Whereas the experiences that we have in our trips, the happiness increases over time. We remember the places we traveled, the people we met. We remember what it was like to be younger than we are today. And even those trips where it seemed everything went wrong and it was a total disaster, over time, that just becomes a great story we tell to friends and laugh about at parties. We are humans, we are social animals as humans, and we seek out connections. It is easier to find a connection with someone who has visited a destination that you have been to versus, say, someone who buys the same television set as you or drives the same brand of car. We are the sum total of our experiences, and that's what makes us the humans that we are. Tourism is a human activity. And if you know any humans, you know that humans have a tremendous capacity for good and a tremendous capacity for not so good. A few weeks ago, there were articles that came out about a temple in Thailand where there were some monks that were keeping captive tigers. And tourists would come to the temple to have their picture taken with the tigers. There were some bad things that happened at this temple, and as a result, the authorities came in and took away all of the tigers. And there were articles published in the press that said this is a perfect example of how tourism and wildlife just don't mix. I have another story to tell you, which is a story of tigers in India. 70% of the existing tigers in the world are found in India today. A century ago, there were 100,000 tigers. Because of poaching and hunting and habitat destruction, by 2011, only 1,700 tigers were left alive, and they lived in 40 tiger preserves throughout the country of India. There was tourism that would visit these preserves, but some folks thought that must be a bad thing because tourists and wildlife shouldn't mix. And so in 2012, the Supreme Court of India banned tourism from the tiger preserves. And some people heralded this as a great victory for animals and for wildlife. Others thought, well, wait a minute, let's take a look at that. What is the biggest threat to tigers? Poachers. What stands between poachers and tigers? The park rangers. Who pays for the park rangers? Fees. Who pays the fees? Tourists. No tourists, no fees. You can do the math. On top of that, the tourists that come to a tiger preserve are there to take that perfect picture. They come with their cameras and their telescopic lenses, and they're looking through the bushes. That makes it very difficult for poachers to sneak into the preserves as well. Without tourists, you have fewer eyeballs there. On top of that, tourists that come there stay in local hotels, eat in local restaurants, use local services. Without them, the economic impact drops significantly. And people looking to make money, some of them turn to other economic options, which included tiger poaching. So what may have been a well-meaning law had the complete opposite effect and was determined to be a total disaster for the tigers of India. Happily, the Supreme Court reversed their decision and responsible tourism was allowed back in the tiger preserves. Within 3 years, the tiger population has increased by 30%. And in fact, the areas where you have the highest tiger density is where you find the most visitation by tourists. This is considered a success. And today, India promotes their beautiful destination with their tigers. Now, not everyone falls in love with the beauty of tigers, and that's where the other aspect of the magic of tourism comes into play, and that is creating economic value. Each tiger, it was estimated, is worth $750,000 per year in tourism revenue. So you may not love tigers, but everyone understands money. And that's something that extends to other things as well, beyond animals. I was just recently had the chance to visit the city of Siem Reap in Cambodia. And while there, we visited the beautiful temple complex of Angkor Wat. I also had the chance to meet with some of the professional guides that work there at the temple. This is an example of economic impact, tourism creating value for intangible things. Beyond that, this is the important thing. We've sort of done the tour a bit on the things that we can do with tourism. There's probably one last thing we should look at, which may be the most important of all, and that is world peace. This year, a study produced by the World Travel and Tourism Council documented how, in fact, tourism is a driver for peace. The more connections we have between people and countries and cultures, the more barriers go down and understanding comes up. And the stronger our economic connections, the less motivated we are to break those relationships and destroy the economic advantages that we share. This is an important thing, and it's really impressive when you think about it. Whether it's me or you, or someone like me or you, when we go off traveling on a trip, as a tourist, we grow economies, we create jobs, we strengthen our families, we protect endangered species, and we preserve cultural heritage, and we reduce the potential for armed conflict. When you think about it, when you're a tourist, you're practically a superhero. And we do this by tapping into the power of human potential. And through the magic of tourism, we can find self-happiness, we can save tigers, and we might just save the world. Thank you.